Hi, you have me today. Dale is not here, so instead you have me. Hope that's all right. If it's not, then I apologize, but it should be absolutely fine. I'm going to be here with Joe talking about conversion rate and talking about split testing and a bunch of awesome stuff that Joe will explain far, far better than me. But shall we start by having a little nosy at where everybody is watching from today? See, Dale makes this look very easy and just pops all these little questions up like it's nothing. And yet I'm like lost. But yeah, where are you watching from today? Please let us know in the chat. We very much appreciate it. And as always, if you comment in the chat, you will be entered to win one of these books, How to Get to the Top of Google. Apparently, it's not that blurry in real life, can I just say? And also, you'll be getting the 2020 version as opposed to my boring, totally terrible 2021 version. And the 2022 version comes with a bunch of other super helpful stuff. But yeah, let's see. People are coming through already. So we've got Matt from Bristol. We've got Joshua from Harrogate. We've got John from North Wales. Hi, John. Haven't seen you for a while. Nice to have you here. We've got Tortoise Property from sunny Peterborough. Once again, glad you've got the sun as well. And we've got Lost Dodo. Well, Alex from Cold Durham. Of course, Phil from Tokyo, as always. Mr. Chu, good morning to you as well. It's actually afternoon for us now, just about. And we've got Emma from Dorset. Well, welcome in, everyone. Glad to have you here. So I'll bring Joe on in just a moment once I figure out how to take this part off the screen. But yeah, and like I said, we're going to be talking about conversion rate optimization, split testing, and how you can get the most out of your website, basically. So hi, Joe. Welcome in.
Hi. How are you? You good?
Yeah, I'm good. A little bit sweaty about presenting today, if it wasn't obvious, but hopefully everybody will enjoy it. Anyway, how are you doing?
Yeah, I'm wicked, thank you. Friday,
Good.
so it's always good.
It's excellent. Is it sunny where you are?
Yeah, it's pretty sunny, but it's super cold. So
yeah, I've got a hot water bottle on my lap, so I get that completely.
I definitely had shorts on. I don't know why. I went full British on it, and then I had to put jeans on because it was too cold.
Nice. I can't even imagine shorts in this weather. I don't even think I own a pair of shorts because I'm just cold all year round. So
I'm usually quite warm, but even I was like, actually, no, this is a little bit cold, even for me. Like,
fair enough. I just don't want to have the heating on at the moment. It's such a pain. But anyway, now we've done the weather report. Shall we jump into your presentation?
Yeah, absolutely.
Boom. There we go. So what are you talking about today, Joe?
So the big one today, I think, is about improving conversion rate with split testing. The overarching kind of methodology behind split testing, going into a couple of different frameworks that I like, and then just really looking at how we use it on a day-to-day basis and how I use it personally through like different projects and how I use it on campaigns. So some of the benefits, some of the negatives. I mean, I don't think there's any negatives, I will say, but it like the limitations of split testing, should I say, or what to expect. So yeah, definitely. Can't wait to get into this one.
Yeah, fantastic. Yeah, I guess you mean there's probably some challenges and some complications if you're new to it. So yeah, I totally get that. Also, just so people know, like I said, type in the comments if you would like to win one of these books. You can put anything, put something nice, put a question, but we will be trying to answer questions at the end just so we can keep things flowing. Because normally, as you know, when me and Dale are on stream, we get carried away and answer questions throughout. So we will be answering questions at the end. So Joe, tell me a little bit about your team at Exposure Ninja.
Yeah, so it's grown a lot over the past couple of years, and we've really branched out and got some amazing members of the team. So some of the beautiful pictures that you see there, Jenny and John on the, I think it'll be the right hand side. That's right. They're head of technical support and hosting. They maintain our server, and their knowledge is insane on all things technical, and it blows my mind every day that I speak to them. I call them the Oracle. So they are like geniuses at what they do. Andre, down to the bottom underneath me, he's an incredible designer and does all of our kind of Figma designs and designs for campaigns as well. So that kind of comes into the ad hoc development side and the core website development. And then myself, I sit in kind of ad hoc development and site maintenance. So I suppose the overview for all of those that don't know, core website development team are the people who build our sites. So the awesome lead gen and e-commerce sites on WordPress and Shopify. That's like essentially what they do. Ad hoc development is like smaller tactical fixes, so much more focused on smaller bite-sized pieces of work. I mean, that can be anything from changing a CTA or an image through to whole landing page builds for PPC. Technical support and hosting is when a site goes down or anything to do with our hosts, because we have a server. And then site maintenance and optimization are ongoing kind of retainer pieces that we do. So site maintenance is the people we host and fixing little issues that might come up or bugs from natural site progression. And then optimization, where this beauty sits, is conversion rate optimization and user experience. So these are kind of, I would say, part of integrated strategies and not necessarily something that you would just do 1 month. They tend to be prolonged projects and work in kind of cycles, which we'll go into a little bit more. So yeah, super exciting.
Indeed. So I know we've done a live stream about this before, but for those who are new, could you give us a quick overview about what conversion rate optimization actually is?
Yeah, the big question. So
Indeed.
Conversion rate optimization has a lot of different facets. For me personally, it's trying to improve conversion rate and improve engagement on a page. So conversion rate typically can mean like, you know, purchasing of a product, but it can be more holistic as well, if that makes sense. So, and it's doing it iteratively and in a kind of data-led way is what I would say, I think. There is different trains of thought on that though. So there's different areas, you know, sometimes you could look at copy and say that you could do conversion rate on that and make sure that you've got the right incentive and law. So it's a really encompassing term, and I think often is quite undervalued maybe, or not kind of seeing how big it can be to a business or a brand.
Absolutely. That definitely makes sense. So could you talk us through a little bit about the process behind CRO?
Yeah, so the way I always describe it to people is as a cycle. So if you're not doing it as part of a cycle or in this kind of, it's underpinned by data is what I would say. So the tracking element looks at, you know, the data that you're going to underpin the test with, why you're going to do it, analyzing that data, then designing the test, and then implementing the test. So it should always feed into each other essentially. So it's really a circular process. So my big thing is when people want to do conversion rate is kind of getting them in that mindset. It's not we do this for a week and it's done. It's really about thinking through what the data is to you, what the data is to the business. One of the big things I think is what a conversion means to you. And there are different types of conversion. And I've spoken about this before, from a minor conversion, which may be a newsletter, but could be equally as important for a long sales funnel, to a major conversion that's a sale. So understanding what you're trying to influence, why, and who you're trying to influence. And it really goes back to, you know, old school marketing, you know, segment targeting and positioning, and looking at those and what you're trying to do is what I would say. So yeah, that's that one. And I think the next slide that we're going to, to you. So I think this is really important. This is like, to me, one of the big bits that people should look at. And especially for longer sales funnel clients and lead gens, it's really important to understand what you consider a conversion. It's not always just like someone taking the product and buying it straight away. A conversion could be a newsletter, it could be a lead that you nurture, it could be a sale, it could be someone going into Instagram or doing something like that. So it's really about understanding what that is for the business, essentially.
Got you. Yeah, because there's all sorts of different stuff, whether you've got a, like you said, a newsletter, sign up in a blog, or if you're trying to get somebody to actually purchase, it's totally different people, totally different stages of the buyer journey. So definitely get that.
And this beautiful evidence pyramid by Cochrane, I still think it's really valid. I've seen it implemented in different ways for split testing as well, so like specifically adapted to it. But what it's really showing you, and is what I think it's split testing is going from anecdotal. So at EN, what we have is in the first month user experience audits, and that's based on best practice, what we know to work, and that's really kind of unfiltered information, background information, expert opinion, which is great. And then you move into kind of the higher level, which is split testing and heat map analysis, which is really filtered information and it being based on data and underpinned by data. So everything that you're doing is moving up this pyramid and getting to a point where it's based fully in realism and not kind of best practice or opinion. And there's nothing wrong with opinion. You can have really good opinions or formulated opinions, but if you move up this table, you're much more likely to see stronger results. The results may not be as big. So when we do UX audits and change some little things, we can see big impacts because they're things that clients haven't got, for example. So they haven't got a trust signal, or they haven't got reviews, or they haven't got a solid CTA. So putting that into a website can be, game changing. When you're going up, this is about when you've got a baseline established that works, but it's not working as efficiently as it could. So think about it in a kind of analogy I heard is like remapping a car. So yeah, the car works and it runs, but is it performance? Is it lean? And is it doing as much efficiently for you as possible? No. So this is where the testing comes in and underpinning it with data and underpinning it with what you want to see. So yeah, that's the evidence pyramid. And then when you get to the top level, which is the God level, which I love, and I do a lot of it. So for me, like I'm doing a PhD proposal, my split testing sits in that, and it's like a meta level analysis of lots of other people's data, and also doing my own. So it's like a really broad level of data, but really minutely examined. So it can be quite hard to contextualize and do within businesses, but that's obviously like the highest ratio of success is probably what I would say, and that's kind of what you're basing it on.
Fantastic. So now we've got a slide about customer feedback, so take us away.
So I think this is like really, really important to understand about the evidence pyramid. So if you're trying to base on data, you need data to base it off, essentially. I personally am a big fan of getting your own data. So if you put Hotjar and you use it for heat maps, you can see how people use your site. Great, it's a really user-led evidence kind of bit of data. What they also allow you to do is get customer feedback, which can be really, really important if you want to answer questions on your site. So I think we've used it in the past. A lot of sites I've recommended. So, have you struggled to purchase today? If so, why? Or did you find the site easy to use? Those kind of questions that can be both quantitative but also qualitative can be really useful in underpinning tests further on, or understanding and sense checking what you consider as an opinion. Customer feedback's great, implement it, but it can take a while if you're not offering incentives or if you haven't got much traffic. So I typically have seen amazing uptake on this before, and it's formed tests that I've done. I've also seen it not take quite a long time. So it's worth taking that with a pinch of salt. You know, if you're only taking 100 visitors a month, this type of feedback can be really good, but you might be actually quicker to just call a couple of people who've used the sites if you have that. Whereas if you've got, thousands of people coming and only 1% of them, you're still kind of getting enough people to gain reasonable insights. And that's kind of the key of all this, is making sure that what you're basing it on is valid research and the sample size is big enough, and that there's a good probability that it's a fair representation. So that's what I would say with customer feedback. Run it for long enough. But it can be really good for getting data on specific pages as well, and the site holistically. So yeah, really important, and a free tool as well. So always win-win-win for a free tool. Yeah, Hotjar's free.
I didn't know that.
yeah, it's incredible. So there are other great tools out there. So I like Hotjar because I know how to use it and I've adopted it. That's why I like it. But I know that Microsoft do one, I think, and a couple of others, but it's free to use, the basic package, and you can get continuous heat maps, like recordings of how people are actually using your site. You can set specific heat maps for pages. You can set these up, so customer research, and you can also, which is amazing, get continuous feedback for 1,000 views a month. So that's great.
Yeah, that's fantastic. So how do you use Google Analytics when it comes to CRO and split testing?
So when you're wanting to do a hypothesis and you're wanting to base it on data, understanding the users who are using your site is very, very crucial to doing it. So we see a lot of people who will say, our users are all in the UK, or our users are all using tablets. And then you go and have a look, and it quite clearly is apparent that it isn't. So it's a really good way to check your opinion. And it's also a very good way to see target areas that can be really beneficial to test on, essentially, is what I would say, because you can segment, target, and look at the audience that you have and see where potentially you can either improve or potentially where is underperforming compared to others, and then cross-sense that with your own business goals or campaign goals. So yeah, Google Analytics is amazing. And I mean, at EM, we use it so many different ways. And again, it's free and it's a really great way.
For sure.
The only thing with it is it's a lot of data, so it can be overwhelming. So that's why I always say think about it in a kind of smaller context of what you want to understand. So users or device, rather than looking at all the data holistically, use it in a more targeted way until you're more comfortable looking at it in a more holistic way.
Very, very good advice. It can be pretty overwhelming. As you can see from just these past 3 screenshots alone, there's quite a lot of data going on there. But once you've had some time to work with it and, picked out what you want.
Yeah, it's important. This one's a really good last screenshot, which is kind of shows you key pages where people are either purchasing or landing and where they're dropping off. So this can be crucial in identifying a page that maybe is underperforming, or where you think should be a really strong performing converting page, but actually, oh, wait a minute, loads of people are leaving it. So why is that? That's where potentially I might run a hot map on that page as well. So you're always underpinning it with data, and it's a data-led solution rather than being anecdotal. And that's what this kind of conversion rate and split testing is about, is being really, really specific and driven with what you're trying to achieve and understand why you're trying to do it, is what I would say.
For sure. So how do you start your data analysis, and what are the steps you take to work through it, basically?
There are so many different frameworks. components to data analysis, right? And there are some that have benefits in different ways. I like this one because it's simple, and I'm really a believer in equipping people with the ability to do it themselves and to understand. So define the target of your analysis. This is essentially creating the hypothesis, so it should be smart, achievable, realistic, and it should be, you know, I believe that if we change this, this will happen. Create the test, so measuring your data would be creating the split test, and then you have analyze, improve, control, and we'll go over all these in individual, but it gives you a kind of way to understand where you are in the process and understand that it's a cycle as well. So if you've missed one of these steps, you're probably not going to get the greatest results, or you aren't following it to a true methodology. And that isn't necessarily always a problem, but it helps to get the most out of this from following it quite methodically, and it will give you better results in the long run, because you will get a better ROI and you will have a better understanding of why you're doing something. And that is key, I think, nowadays, rather than just doing something because you want to do it. Understanding the impact that it's going to have is very, very valuable. And that really comes into analysing the data and improving the section can be really key to that, because tests may look great and it may give you a positive understanding what is in that and involved in implementing that can show you whether or not it's a positive ROI, and it can be really useful to know. It doesn't necessarily mean something what's better, it's still worth doing because there's an offset of time, cost and input that you have to consider. So yeah, that's what I would say with that one.
Absolutely. And we'll hop on to the next step in a moment. But somebody was just asking on LinkedIn if this will be recorded. And yes, it will be. It'll be up on YouTube, Facebook, and Instagram. I tried to send a message, but it doesn't send messages to LinkedIn, which is a right pain. But yeah, I hope that answers your question. So yeah, heading straight into step one.
Step one, define. So understand why you're testing it on the site. This is a huge one to me. You need to understand what success looks like, because you can't run a test without knowing what success looks like. If you do, it's going to be very hard to contextualize whether or not it's worthwhile, and whether or not it is truly success. And what I mean by this is you might get a result that says this version of the test is better, but if it's marginally better by 0.0001%, yes, it is better. You know, it's empiric. Is it better in the way that it's worth implementing? Probably not. But having that level of understanding, and that's where you need to be underpinned by the gaps that you've identified in Google Analytics, the gaps that you've identified in Hotjar, and then really that should go into defining your hypothesis and the objective of what you're doing. I will say with this as well, it's important to know that yes, like the aim is to improve. Like, obviously you always want to improve the conversion rate, or you want to improve something, but I truly, genuinely believe that learning what doesn't work and why can be just as important. So go into it with an open mind that not every test you're going to run is going to go, oh yeah, this new version's better. It might say no why, but then you can ask why and look why. So just as important to know. So yeah, that's that one, but it's really, really useful to make sure that you're underpinning this. And I would constantly link back your hypothesis on what you're doing to the gap you found and make sure that it relates to that, because otherwise you're moving away from the reason that you're doing it, essentially.
That makes sense. Yeah, I like what you said about, you know, getting things wrong is actually quite good, because then you know what to not do in the future and you can figure out why it didn't work. So that's super, super useful.
Step two, measure. So this is what they call measure, but in the split testing way, it would be creating the tests, essentially. I use Google Optimize. I like Google Optimize. We use a lot of Google here. Okay, so That's why I use it. There are other versions out there and other people that I know use Clarity and really love it, which is Microsoft's one. And there are other kind of smaller ones that can do some really amazing features. The reason I would suggest Google Optimize to a lot of people is when we go into installing it and other things, it's quite easy to do and it's free. So if you're going to get into this, try it from a free point and see what you can do, and then you can adapt what you want to do with knowledge. But I will say, you know, Optimize is used across every sector, so, and from every level as well. So, you know, for me, I use it personally at every level and with every campaign. So it's really, really functionally very good. And I think quite user intuitive because it links with Google Analytics. So you've got that ecosystem there that's feeding into one another. Whereas if you're not, you have to bear that in mind in the analyze stage. So yeah, define and segment the audience. So you can segment audiences in this, and you can do the test to specific places, specific areas, specific people, devices. So make sure that it's linked to that, unless you're doing a really broad one, but understanding why and the gaps will help do that for you.
Awesome.
Yeah, free, Pumpkin Alex, free is excellent. I'm a big fan of it, yeah. It's just, there are so many things out there that are charged in apps, plugins, and some of them are amazing and we use some of them. But things like this, for businesses to be able to understand and learn and experiment with, doing it for free, cuts off that barrier and friction that we like, remove friction to purchase, and it is a big one. So you can learn so much doing this. So yeah, things to test. Big one, CTAs. So you can test calls to action. That could be in the copy, that could be in the way that it is. So for example, you could have the form here and you could test it with a button version or a different CTA type. It's important to know like the limitations of what you can do in Google Optimize through the visual editor and what you maybe would need to have some experience of coding or development to implement. And there is a crossover there, I will say, but smaller kind of text changes or law incentive changes. So like request a free callback would be very easily achieved in the tech. Changing the fields and changing others may be harder to do in terms of a A/B test. You maybe then need to look at different types of tests, which I'll go on to. But calls to action, big one, and you can get big wins and big results from this quite quickly, I would say. Page engagement or bounce rate, measuring like specific elements on a page. You can link this with Hotjar as well to see, but you can help understand bounce rate and page session duration and those kind of things to see it, including something like testimonials or trust signals, helps to build that out. Short story, it does, but it will test which ones you want to use. So you could do an A/B test of this or a different design version of this to see if it had a better engagement, or you could do it with a different platform. So I know that people have done it with, you know, FIFO versus Trustpilot, which one was more, and for different industries, they have different effects. So you can use that and you're underpinning it with data and you're understanding what users are wanting from your site. So yeah, page engagement or bounce rate.
Oh yeah, we did a bit of trust signals, didn't we, in the previous one, I think?
So trust signals is on this one. This can be implementing it in different ways, and which types of trust signals you use. There's so many and there's so many different ways to represent it, but these are kind of things that you can do and test essentially. So this one uses Trustpilot. You can measure that with another version, or you could measure it with a different design version of this and see which one had a better impact. If there was a bigger click-through rate to Trustpilot, so you might have found, linking this back to your data in Hotjar, that lots of people were clicking this, or lots of people were trying to go through to this page to validate you as a brand, and then you link it up or you change the design and see what the engagement's like and measured from that, and if conversion rate or CTAs are used more because of a change you've made. So really useful one and really big for the smaller brands that are not able to necessarily operate on a price point all the time. So building out an extra value and trust can be what makes them decide you over maybe a leading competitor or someone who's very established in the marketplace. Layout's a big one. This is a slightly harder one sometimes to implement, but it is very useful in understanding user flow, and if I'm moving something further up, so it's higher above the fold or the mid rate, does that influence people staying on and converting more? Are you presenting them with the information much sooner? So this is a really useful one, but can sometimes be a little bit development heavy. Often when we go on to this, we'll go to kind of different types of tests, I think. And this is where you would potentially need to look at something called a redirect test, because the versions would be so different. So yeah, that's what I would look at for that one. But yeah, really useful. Google Optimize. So here's a little overview of it. You've got variant 1 and the original. So this is in kind of two ways. The usual split test, like an A/B test, and it should be quite focused on micro changes. So ones that are very measurable and limited on the amount of variables that are in place. So the thing that I find when people implement Google Optimize and split tests is they have way too many changes and make way too many tests on one thing. So it's very hard then to discern which one is the impact, because you've got too many, the bias is off, there's too many variables, and there's too many things to make accurate and drawn conclusions. So that's what I would say, but it shows you the modeled conversion rate and where it should go, and the optimized analysis will be very useful to follow this if you're unsure where the experiment's going on it. Rule type, so this is like where you put in what you're trying to do. So you've got behavior there, device, category, geography, technology. This is where you're setting the parameters of your test. So for example, if you wanted it to only be on desktop or mobile, set it in the device. If you wanted it by UTM, so like a specific trigger, you can do it by that. For Google, behavior, geography, technology, all like that. And then you've got the advanced ones in there. You can start getting really funky with the code and data layer and variables, but for now, like the top rule types are really great, and you can also link it with the Google Analytics and Google Ads that you have, because you'll need to do that for the test. So super important way to select the rules that you're going to use for the test.
It's pretty deep, isn't it, really?
Yeah, I mean, it was a pretty big ask to do this in one session, but my hope people will understand like where you can go and follow the steps and just go and do it, because until you start doing it and until you start getting involved, you're missing out. Like your competitors are doing this, and it's really, really crucial to understand now the data that's going around and how people are using it. Get quite, I suppose, nerdy on it, but there's a framework called SOAR, which is essentially about creating emotional responses from environmental stimuli, and that's where this is going. Really, what you're trying to do is elicit a response, a behavioural response from an environmental stimuli, which is the element on the page. So without understanding how your user's doing this and your user, you're missing out essentially. So yeah, that's the reasoning behind it, and it's a super important reason as we go through in digital marketing to a really noisy place and a really overcrowded place in a lot of places, and also places that are dominated by brand leaders or existing brands. Having this understanding of your niche or your consumer to a much deeper level could be the difference between you making a sale, making a lead, or even just creating that conversation and that narrative and place to explore how to convert them. So yeah, this is why I think it's so important, and hopefully this just gives people the tools to go and have a go. And you know, I'm always available. You can email me if you want Ian's help. There's free marketing reviews that we do and elements like that that really help you understand that and how to implement that further down the line.
Absolutely. But it's definitely the kind of thing that I think you have to see it in action before you can have like a full understanding, I suppose. Sort of see the results and see, yeah,
it is. And like, honestly, like my first few tests were quite ropey, and you do learn from it, but there's so many amazing courses out there, and like so many free courses and guides and so much amazing industry knowledge that you can teach this yourself, and it's not to be scared of. So that's the one thing I say, if you don't ask, you don't get, what I'd used to say. If you don't try it, you're not going to learn it, and that's what this is about. So yeah, that's where I would start with setting up your tests and what you want to do with that.
Absolutely. No, that's fantastic. So yeah, let's get into the type of tools that you use then. We've sort of talked about Google Optimize a bit already.
Yeah, so this is a big one. This is what I would stick with if you're comfortable with Google Analytics, and it links up with that, and it creates a much more, it allows you to explore it in whatever level you're comfortable, granular thing, and you can do any type of analysis really from this. So Google Optimize is my number one. Thank you, Nicole. Yeah, it's an amazing topic, and honestly, please, if you're ever interested in it, get in touch, and we can always talk about it. I love it. Google Optimize, the next slide. Types of implementation. This looks a little bit scary. The one back, it's not. The top two are probably the most stable way to install Google Optimize to get the best experience for the end user. They will likely need someone who has some development experience to install it, or knowledge of coding. That is, up front. But Google Tag Manager, you can install it through a container with no code, like you can Hotjar, like you can so many other things. Use that if you're unsure, and it will give you great results. And maybe if after a few tests you think, yeah, this is what I need to be doing, open a conversation with someone, see if you can get it installed in a different way, or have a look at it then. But Google Tag Manager, perfect way to start, and you can get incredible results. The next level, the anti-flicker snippet. Good thing to install if you get a flicker when people are landing on the redirect test or the A/B test. So useful thing to install, small piece of code. I would say most of these are quite low risk, but with code and injecting it in anywhere, please make sure if you're going to do it, you back up your site or make sure you know how to revert it. But they're quite low risk. But Google Tag Manager, much safer if you're unsure. So yeah, this was just testing behavior, really simple test. And it was essentially, we wanted to see if we took out the form, could we increase calls and get someone to specifically act in a certain way? The answer was yes, we did. And it raised calls, and that to them was a much better conversion. So that was how it worked. And that was version 1 of the test. Version 2 of the test was the original. So simple way to do it. Type test, lot in it, but A and B, small tests, micro tests are changing maybe one bit of text, one CTA or one element, monitoring it, controlling it, and analyzing it. If you're changing 2, 3, 4 things in a page, very hard to understand what you're doing. Redirect tests, much better to test a version of a page against another version of a page. So they may be completely different, but you may be able to get a result of which one's better. Yeah, and that's great for launching. The only thing is then you're going to need to look at why, and that can be quite a slow process. But there is a real benefit to doing redirect tests in some ways. So it's just weighing up the option, which one you have. Obviously with a redirect test, you would take 2 versions of the page. One would be completely, maybe completely different design. So that means you would need to have that built and designed beforehand. So there's obviously a cost of implementation to that before you can do it. A/B tests, a lot of them you can do within the visual editor on Google Optimize. So it's like a safe way of understanding whether the change you're going to implement permanently is going to be worthwhile. That's the thing I would say. Multivariate, like it says, it's multi. So it's looking at not working in an A/B is a bivariate traditionally. So two, multivariate is multivariables. It's great, but it's harder to interpret the data essentially. But you can do more at once. So there's a lot of benefit, and once you get more familiar with it, it's definitely something to explore. Yeah. So step 3, analyze. So this really comes back to what I was saying about assessing ROI and impact towards the business goals. You can have something that is better, but if it's going to cost you £4,000 to implement, or you're going to need to do this, and actually it's only going to yield you an extra conversion potentially every month that's worth £2, the scale of kind of economy of what you're implementing is outweighed, but it's useful knowledge to have, and is potentially another way to implement it in a cheaper way. That's what I mean by assessing the ROI and impact towards the business goal. Typically, if you're doing things with A/B testing, it would likely be much less costly to implement because it should be a small or micro change, but always worth knowing that, especially if you're changing incentives or laws. So something we've seen before is that, and I've seen happen a few times, and I've had to discuss it with people, is that they change the incentive to 50% off or buy one, get two free. And it's like, it worked. Conversion rate went up, great. But they couldn't run that at a profit. So the knowledge and the test was flawed from the start. So that's why it's making sure that your first hypothesis is realistic. And when you analyze it, you're sense checking that actually, if you implemented this, how long could you implement it for? There are always reasons to do tests like that. So, for example, you might think, why would you test something that's running at a loss? If you're doing it in a specific way to maybe build some brand awareness, or as a loss leader to get people into the site and involved in the chain, can be a really useful way to do it and understand if that will have a positive impact on it. But do it with a pinch of salt. So assess ROI, make sure it's in line with your business goals. So if your business goals are to increase average order value and you're testing a discount, probably not going to be conducive to that. So just making sure that you understand the implications of what you're going to do. The third one I would say as well is understanding the environment in which you run the test. So if you run a test and you have another external offer on, or like another thing that you're running an email, or another thing that you're running traditional through paper or in store, and people are coming to the site from that and converting because of that offer, you need to be aware of holistically what you're doing as a business. So just driving traffic to it to do the test, make sure that there's not other stimuli or bias that you're unaware of in the test, essentially, when you analyze it. So always have a look at any other external comms or offerings that you're doing, just to make sure that it is that change that's created that effect.
Absolutely. So, yeah. And how do we implement it now we've done all the technical work, it seems?
Yeah, so the implementation is done then in the site. So if you use it through Optimize, you can often export it in the CSS or the code of it, or you maybe, once you know that it's definitely going to work, that's where you would engage with an agency or your developer to implement it for you, depending on the severity. If you're going to do it yourself and you're adventurous, do it in a draft format on the site or in a staging, just so you're minimizing any risk away from the live. But things like small text changes or image changes and things like that are much easier to implement yourself. So yeah, that would be what I would say, and that might be from the next example. Might just be we've gone back.
I went backwards. Sorry.
So it might be implementing a whole new above the fold and a whole new page. Might need to engage a developer. or it might be the next one, which is essentially looking at smaller changes. So I think on the next slide, you've got ones where we did like the join for free on the form and we updated that. So that could be something that you would change and you might be able to do that much simpler yourself or at a lot lower cost. So that's about what it's understanding the impact of doing the work and also how you're going to do it. So always just engage with your developer or the people who build your sites. You know, and we do lots of work like this for people who are in campaigns, out of campaigns. We can work in those ways, and there are lots of other development agencies that can implement this type of work for you.
For sure. And then how do we go about reviewing this whole crazy process?
Oh yeah, so this is like once you've done it, you've implemented it, and then you assess the ROI and the impact of it. So that really looks at the test now been run, you've done the implication, you've put the page up, and then not in a month or 2 months, you know, you're talking over a considered period of time, quarter, half, annual. The impact of that is it's streamlined. Is there anything else you want to test? And this links back to being an iterative process. So with smaller micro tests, you're typically maybe looking at running a test for 4 to 6 weeks, depending on traffic. So you can see that then implementing that and then reassessing. It's an ongoing cycle, and that's what I mean by it being iterative. And it's also incremental increases. So that, you know, that's why you need to be reviewing the data and making sure that what you're doing is worthwhile and making sure that the impact's there. Cycles of work, again, so you take a period of working, test, implement, monitor. If you then go and do another test and implement straight away, it's hard to understand the actual impact of that. So for me, when we go on to kind of this, it's always about working on multiple pages if you can and testing different elements so you're getting the most out of your time efficiency. Because if you're hosting it and, you know, all your eggs are in one page, or as it were, it can take much longer to get maybe the improvement you want. And that's where it's about making sure you have that baseline established on the site before you go into this kind of work. Because if you're not even at a point like that, it can be a long process. But it is a journey, and it's about going on that journey to understand your consumer and your site in a much, much deeper way.
For sure. So, is this just a review of everything that you've just said?
Yeah, 5
Perfect.
steps.
Amazing.
5 steps to better conversions. So I hope that helps. And like I say, always there's loads of material out there. So I'll then go on to the questions, a couple of really good ones there. So I'll go over those in a minute. Define, measure, analyze.
Oh, I went back. Sorry. Then you go back again, apparently.
Yeah, improve and then control. So it's just that process, defining your hypothesis, understanding the data, doing it in a really considered way and why you're doing it and what impact you hope to achieve. Measure, making the test, doing the test, making sure there's little kind of bias as you can hope to achieve in it. Analyze the data. So is it successful? Isn't it successful? What does success mean? Has it reached what you wanted? Has it, you know, essentially, you know, approved your hypothesis? Is it right? Improve, implementing it, then looking at the implemented change and what you can do to do the next cycle of improvements. So yeah, the 5 steps. There are loads of other frameworks to it, but this gives you a starter onto it. And you know, if you want to learn more about it, you're super involved in it, Udemy is a great place to learn. And there are other kind of great leaders out there who do incredible work on this that offer so many great materials as well for free.
Absolutely. Absolutely. You've been very succinct because we've got 10 whole minutes for questions, which is fantastic. And just a reminder to everyone, if you do type a question in the chat, or just say hi, or just say that you enjoyed the stream, you will be entered in for a chance to win a copy of How to Get to the Top of Google, although it would be that shiny new 2022 edition. And just a reminder as well that if you've learned anything from this stream, hit like and subscribe down below. We do 3 videos every week, long video on a Monday, little video on a Wednesday, and then a live stream like this on a Friday. So cool. Let's start with the questions, Joe. So what sort of timescales do you recommend between making amendments? So would you say like run for a week, fortnight, monthly? What would you say?
So this is really about making sure that the data you have is representative of the audience you want. So it's kind of input, output. If you have a massive amount of volume of traffic that's representative of the target audience, then maybe you can run it in a shorter time. But typically I would say 4 to 6 weeks most of the time. But you might be able to do something quicker if you are testing something really specific and you have the right amount of volume. Google Optimize will often tell you when it thinks it's done, and often tell you when it doesn't think it's done. It's important to note that usually there will always be a wait to one or the other on Google Optimize for 1 to 2 weeks. So you could potentially be seeing a false positive or false negative until the test itself had stabilized. So I would really recommend between the 2 to 4 weeks, but I have seen people do it in others, but yeah, 2 to 4 weeks minimum, but I would say more than likely 4 to 6 weeks to get really good data and understand that what you're going to do is going to work.
Yeah, you want long enough that you can collect a lot of data, but not so long that you never get around to making the changes, essentially.
Exactly, and there is a trade-off with that. So like, you don't want to be doing this testing and running the test for 10 months. You need to be and make a judgment call, but also make sure that you're not doing it at a very low rate or low quick turnaround.
Exactly. Oh, next question is from John, one of our channel members. How can Google Optimize be used with Shopify home / collection and product pages? Can different Shopify page templates be used with A/B testing?
From what I understand from what you're saying, you could do it on Shopify on a collection page and alter maybe an element in the page through Optimize, which would be an A/B test. If you were wanting to test different versions of the template against each other, so they would probably be quite different, you can do that. They would just need to sit on 2 different URLs is probably the best way, which would be technically a redirect test. But yeah, you can do it. You just have to have the collection page ready to test. So you need both templates first. If you were just wanting to do a smaller A/B test traditionally, you can do it that way. But yeah, you can.
Oh, sorry, were you still answering that question?
No. I was looking at that. I'm not 100% sure. Like service-driven page. Do you mean like lead gen or like a service product? I would make sure that it was kind of heat mapped. Often it would be by looking at the incentive that you have. So it may be more around the narrative and the storytelling of why you're worth picking in your service over others. So this really links back into building out the brand and the value add that you bring to the user, especially if they're a new user. So why would you pick you over another competitor? Is what I would say.
Absolutely. Lost Dodo doesn't have a question, but they just said mind boggled. Lots to think about.
It is. There's a lot to take in, but digest this in smaller tests. First step, crack on to Google Analytics and crack on to Hotjar, run some things and look at that data and see if you can spot an outlier or something that you think is underperforming, and then go from there. I'm a big fan of milestones. Like, I don't think breaking it down into those 5 sections and do section 1 first is all you should think about. Maximum or most efficient. I mean, there is obviously, you can over test something, and like it's kind of like the law of diminishing returns. So there's a bell curve to whether or not you're going to be getting good results after. So you're going to hit peak and then it's going to go off. So you just need to decide that. Depends on how big the changes are and how small the changes are. but likely with how long it's going to take to implement and get all the data, if you're spending a year, 2 years doing it, then the user or the area may be completely different. So, for example, people who are running loads of tests and doing it before COVID, and I don't want to bring that in, is their data valid? Or consumer behaviour and consumers completely different online now to post-COVID. And I know a few of my friends who've had to completely change their research and their data to allow for that. So time is always something to bear in mind, and how long it's going to take you to get that data. And is something in the environment or the marketplace going to change? So there's a fine line.
Absolutely makes sense.
There's loads. Surveymonkey, I think, is one we've used, but you can do it through Hotjar, a survey, and they'll send it out for you. So maybe look at that or link it up to another. But honestly, I'm a really big believer, Pumpkin Alex, in pick up phone, like contact them.
Yeah.
If you're allowed and it's within GDPR, you will get some great results. Maybe not what you want to hear, and it may be painful, but we definitely do it here, and it's definitely a really good way to learn from holistically what your users are experiencing, and also wider business. So yeah, qualitative feedback always. If you're going to do a survey, it might be worth adding an incentive depending on how big it is. It definitely gets people to go through to it.
Absolutely. And where possible, if your customers are people that if they're regulars, just ask them if you can look over their shoulder while they use your website. As ridiculous as it sounds, but they might do something totally unexpected that you didn't think they would do, or they might miss something that's so obvious to you but isn't obvious to your customers.
Yeah, so that's like the Hotjar recordings. It blows my mind, and I mean, I spend a lot of time watching them and doing it for clients. It literally every week will blow my mind how someone's used a site, and you can get them for free and just watch someone using your site, and it is like herding cats. You think, oh, we've directed them to this page, this is where they're going to go, and they'll go off kilter somewhere else, and then you'll watch a few and you see, oh, actually a lot of people are doing this. Oh, let's have a look at the device. Oh, it's mobile. Like, maybe I'll have a look at mobile and see that's a bit different to how I thought it was on desktop. And it's little things like that can be a big difference and have a big impact. So that's why I say analyze the data of people who are using your site is great. Hotjar, if you can't get in touch with the recordings, it's a great way to do it.
Absolutely. Absolutely. We've got a question from Phil as well.
Proportionate to the business, I think. Unpopularly to some people, maybe, I am not a believer in vanity metrics. So if you have 10,000 visitors increased and none of them are relevant, I don't necessarily think it's that worthwhile. You're better to have 5 people come on who are going to convert. So just have that in your mind in the increase in traffic. It's quality to me versus quantity. Yes, getting out there can be good for your ranking. Yes, getting out there can be good for your brand awareness, but getting out there in the wrong way or to the wrong audience can be a bit of a false exercise or false economy. Yeah, lead gen rather than a product. That's what I would say. Tortoise property. Just look at the content, the copy, what you're offering, and the law, and do those. So, for example, if you're lead gen and it's really high committal, so you're asking them to build a pool or something that's going to be a big investment, maybe offer them a white paper, maybe offer them a newsletter and tie a different CTA that's lower committal and see if that helps improve conversion rate or the sales funnel. So test that type of thing.
Absolutely. I've just noticed it's 2:00. So I'm going to do the little draw. But thank you, everybody, for all your fantastic questions. That was great. And thank you, Joe, for talking us through everything. So I'm going to draw a winner. Hopefully it won't be me or the Exposure Ninja channel or Nightbot. Matt, if you want to get in touch, you can send me an email at jess.percival@exposureninja.com and we will get you a free copy of How to Get to the Top of Google sent out to you. So if you wouldn't mind getting in touch, that would be wonderful. So yeah, that's pretty much the end of the stream. Is there anything else you would like to add, Joe, at all about anything?
We have a great department here. If you're unsure or you get the information, get in touch. I'll be doing lots more videos over the next couple of weeks that touch on some of the elements in this, like trust signals, and then there's some other ones about conversion rates. So yeah, keep tuning in and fire any questions you have over. I'd love to hear it, and it's been a pleasure. So I hope everyone has an absolutely amazing weekend, and let's hope no rain.
Yeah, fingers crossed. It's going to be cold, but no rain. Let's hope, hey? Let's hope.
Yeah, definitely. Let's hope. We'll see.
Indeed. Well, thank you, everybody, for coming to the stream, and we will see you next week. Don't forget to like and subscribe. It's very important. And we will see you in the next one.
Thank you.
Cheers, Joe.